All right, we're continuing our interview, fascinating interview with Jeff Nyquist, Russia, China, geopolitical expert. And we're doing part 2 of our interview. And part 1, which was aired on St. Patrick's Day in 2022, you can see that on In the Dugout. Here in part 2, we're going to take, and in part 1, we look, more current day. What's happening in Ukraine? Why is it happening? What's the background there? What's the likely outcome to happen to that war? We covered all that in part 1. In part 2, this is the scary part of the Jeff Nyquist prophecies, if you would call them that, that the long-term strategy, probably written down somewhere with China, with Russia, certainly China, I think Jeff would tell you, is to invade and conquer America in the same way we're seeing Russia invade and conquer Ukraine. Only it's not going to, if they conquer America, it's not going to be with just conventional weapons. It's going to be far worse. How will that attack happen? What are all the different components they might use and why are they doing it? That's what we're going to get into. So let's welcome back Jeff Nyquist. Jeff, welcome back to In the Dugout.
Thanks for having me.
So is there a parallel between the Russian invasion of Ukraine and what China alone or in conjunction with Russia might be thinking about and scheming with America?
Well, I go back to what a defector told me. Colonel Stanislav Lunev was in the GRU. He worked in that's the intelligence branch of the Russian General Staff. He defected in 1992, and he told me that shortly before his defection, at a meeting of the Russian generals in Moscow, they talked about their future plans. And Lunev was a person who knew military plans. He was involved in them. He'd seen them. And their plan was they had gotten together with China. They had signed secret agreements with China to share all intelligence and all intelligence operations in America and in North America. And he said their plan was a future invasion of the United States, in which Russia would take Alaska and parts of Canada, and China would take the lower 48 states. And he said that the key to this plan was, he said, China and Russia individually could not defeat the United States, but only in combination. And I asked him, I said, well, how is this possible? He said, it's Russian missile power and Chinese manpower. The combination, he said, could defeat the US under the right conditions.
So we'll get into some of the tactics, the nukes, the missiles, the manpower, Mexico, because it wouldn't be just America they'd be taking over. If they're, it would probably necessarily include Mexico and Canada as well, I would presume.
Yes.
Right. We'll talk. But you write. I think you wrote. I think I remember reading somewhere that you think that the COVID crisis and the potential exposure of how COVID was indeed a Chinese military covert operation and the potential exposure of that. There's a lot of questions being asked. We don't really know what kind of evidence or willpower there is to uncover, but you think that potential embarrassment and whatever resulting recriminations might come against China, if that it is ever brought to light, big if you think that may have changed China's mindset where they might be sharply accelerating their plans and their timetable to actually conduct this attack you're warning of. Your thoughts on that?
Well, look at how horribly we reacted to this viral pandemic. Look at the fiasco that has happened to our health system and within our government. Yeah, if I was a Chinese general, I'd be encouraged. And I want to point out a secret speech that the defense minister of China made about 20 years ago that was published by and translated in English by Epoch Times in 2005. It leaked out of China. It has been confirmed to me by two different sources, and it also absolutely lines up with what Colonel Stanislav Lunev told me, that it was a future plan to invade China, and China would get control of the lower 48 states. General Xi's speech, secret speech, is about doing this, about it, but using a biological attack to kill 100 million to 200 million Americans to soften us up to make that attack possible. And he says that they would be risking nuclear war to do this attack, but they're willing to do it because China is grossly overpopulated. General Xi said, look, he said, Hitler used the word Lebensraum, and realistically, we have a Lebensraum problem. We have a Lebensraum problem much worse than Germany had in the 1930s. And we need room. We need to make a second China. Where are we going to make it? If we invade Australia, the Americans are going to defend Australia. If we invade India, America's going to defend it. We can't find new land for our people, so it might as well be America will be the new land, since we have to confront and defeat America. And he said it's a tragedy because America's always been nice to China. Historically, they helped us in the war against Japan. But look, it's them or us. We need the land. We have to feed our people, and so we have to teach the Chinese people to go out, that is out of China, and make a second China. And this is and to colonize. And he talks about exterminating the population here in the lower 48 states.
I mean, this is not science fiction, Jeff.
No, it is not. In fact, I spoke with one of the Pentagon translators.
You've talked, you've heard these speeches, you've talked to defectors. This is not some author making this stuff up. These things have all been said either publicly or privately.
Well, first of all, this
is wild.
Yeah, this is a speech that Chi Hao-chien gave, and what one of the Pentagon translators told me was they wanted to authenticate the speech. So, you know, and he was a Mandarin speaker, and so they examined the speech patterns, the language use. China is a very difficult language, Mandarin, and it's very idiosyncratic that many of these leaders have an idiosyncratic use of the language. And they studied the speech and they determined that it was Chi Hao-chien, the Chinese defense minister, speaking these words.
All right, so that's, you know, we talked in our first segment how America may be at a geopolitical strategic disadvantage because we can't sustain a long-term foreign policy or geopolitical strategy. We change administrations every 4 years, every 8 years, where Russia and China have been working for decades on plans, and they're advancing those plans. We know the Chinese have infiltrated much of our economic system and universities with their centers. We had them here at Bryant University and at University of Rhode Island. Here those what were they called, the what centers, the Mao centers, or whatever they were called. We know Russia has been trying to influence elections and energy policy. They're trying to push the green energy climate as a way or the craze in order to weaken America from an energy perspective, and I think they've succeeded on that. But you're saying that these strategies might be far sooner to be realized than originally planned because of these China COVID origins investigations. You really believe they're accelerating their timetable here?
Well, yes. I'm on the committee for the present danger of China, and we had before our committee some months ago, actually, it was last May, a Chinese businessman who had was a Hong Kong businessman who had extensive dealings in China, and he had friends in Beijing connected to the government, and they were telling him that China was preparing to go to war with the United States, and that the original plan was that they would go to war with us in 2035, but because of the damage to their economy that Trump had done, and because of other complications within the Chinese system, their economy, they had to go now. they had to push to go now. And he said that that is known within the top of the Chinese government, within the certain realm of the government, that yeah, that's they're accelerating. Yes.
So was the release of COVID part of that strategic, part of that first step of the plan to see how it would work, or was that accidental? And maybe they were working on a bioweapon, and what do you think? What was the COVID part of this, the first step in this strategic going to war with America plan, or was it something where the cat got out of the bag accidentally, and now that it's out, we're going to have to double down?
Well, in the last couple of months, I've been working as a contributor to a book on this subject, and this is what sort of the consensus is, that either they released it on purpose or it was released accidentally, and they just decided to go with it as an on purpose. That is, to use it as a real attack once it got out. We don't know which it is. My personal opinion, they released it on purpose, and here's why. The virus, it basically incubated in Wuhan right at the moment, the ideal moment, where you had the Chinese New Year, where you had all these Chinese from all around the world, the Chinese diaspora. They were celebrating the New Year in Wuhan, and they were getting on airplanes, and they were going back to Italy and Australia and North America and other countries. And that cannot be a coincidence. The one day that you have the most massive air traffic out of China is that end of the Chinese New Year. And that's when this thing was incubated in Wuhan to go everywhere. And then they sealed Wuhan off from the rest of China.
Right.
That shows premeditation and calculation. There's also intelligence information from sources in the Wuhan lab that the actual virus was not developed in that lab. It was brought there, and what they developed was an aerosol spray for spreading it, and then they were instructed to spread it in the city.
Brought there from where?
A military district in northern China.
Oh, okay, not
Yeah.
within China. So if this was phase one of this strategic plan, you had mentioned earlier a disease, a bioweapon to kill hundreds of millions of Americans. This obviously wasn't it, or was it intended to be it and it failed, or is there something else bigger coming that you're afraid of?
You look at the details of this virus and how nasty it is. They may have thought, I think they thought it was going to be, much more lethal than it was. But the problem with these kind of viruses is they have a high rate of mutation, and they mutate towards the common cold. And the mutation, I think you saw the panic, you saw the numbers of people being hurt. Initially, dentists and doctors were dying, nurses were dying in the very first weeks. In China, in Italy. That suddenly that just wasn't the case anymore.
It mutated far quicker than they thought.
I think that's part of it. But they kept it up through their friends in the West. They kept up the panic, and the problem that they had was that it didn't quite work. But it damaged our economies, and it enabled their friends here in the West.
Yes, it certainly did that. So, do you believe that an even bigger, more lethal bioweapon release is in the offing?
I fear that there is something more coming in that regard. I do fear that it is.
All right, before we get into the how this invasion, attempted conquering of America might happen, let me go back to something that I briefly mentioned before, the universities. They're called the Confucius Institutes. So in Rhode Island, I know we had at least two. University of Rhode Island, which at least a year or a year and a half ago canceled theirs. Bryant University, which is a business college here. My wife used to work there. We saw all the buildings going up over there, that we saw all the Chinese students there. A lot of us presume, China doesn't do anything just for the good of other people. They do, like we said earlier, they have a strategic plan, and it seemed like these Confucius Institutes were part of that plan, where they could collect and transfer intellectual property, whether it would be business or scientific or whatever, back to Mother China. Do you believe that's what these Confucius institutes were designed to be?
Oh yeah, and not only do I believe that, the Swedes, after the pandemic started, they forced those things to close down in Sweden. They wanted them out. So if Sweden is awake to these things being a danger, then I think we all should realize that these are fronts. China has a tremendous, they don't have the best intelligence service in the world, but they have the biggest. And they have fronts, and they use business, and they use money, and they develop friendships, and they draw people into an economic relationship, and they hurt people, and they exploit that economic relationship ruthlessly. You talk to people in South America, for example, and the Chinese ruthlessness. I talked to an American businessman that had worked in Chile, and he told me he had employees from a Chinese company, and the Chinese had gone into partnership with this Chilean company, murdered the head of the company, then took it over, basically. This is what these folks were saying. Yeah.
So if these Confucius centers were spy centers,
Yes, absolutely. Subversion
if they
centers.
were, then I'm sure they're not the only spies in this country.
Oh no, absolutely not.
If
Well, you mentioned the labs. Yeah.
you had the labs, should America immediately deport every Russian national from this country?
Well,
I
maybe
mean,
not
I mean Chinese.
Chinese, maybe not every Russian national. There.
No, I mean Chinese.
Look,
I meant Chinese.
I think that we need to get a lot of the Chinese. Look, the Chinese are all over our labs. The percentage of scientists in our labs, and look, I talked to a lady who has her PhD from Emory that feeds the CDC. She said that the number of Chinese in the CDC, the number of Chinese in Emory, she says it's around 15%. And I had another former Pentagon intelligence guy say it's larger than this. The Chinese.
So the lie. Oh, so while all along we thought the lies from the CDC, the misinformation from the CDC was motivated by big pharma money, and it may be to some degree, but you're saying it's really could be influenced by the Chinese government.
Oh yeah, well, not only that. Look, Chinese corporations
Wow.
are extensions of their government. Every Chinese corporation has a secret Communist Party committee on it that makes all the real decisions for that company.
So China has, listen, there's no question, China has infiltrated our country.
Oh yeah,
in many ways, right?
no doubt, absolutely. And look at how many of our politicians have been bought off by companies that are in bed with China.
Pelosi, Barbara Boxer, what's that? The guy who had
Diane Feinstein.
Feinstein and Mint,
Right.
not Boxer, Feinstein and Mint. Then the Swalwell guy with the Chinese beauty. All right.
Look at Mitch McConnell's wife is Chinese.
Wow.
So it is a problem.
Wow.
I mean, I wouldn't say that all Chinese immigrants here are bad. That would be the wrong thing to say, but we have a problem.
We got to be smart about this, right?
Right. I mean, one lady, I've been told by more than one person that the people at the Chinese scientists coming to Emory and coming to the CDC and a lot of our labs, they aren't just simply regular Chinese trying to find a better life. They are from Communist Party families.
All right, so they've infiltrated our universities, they've infiltrated our healthcare and medical system. Have they infiltrated our military and Pentagon as well?
Well, communism has. I mean, you've seen the advent of political correctness. We are graduating communists at West Point. You can be a communist.
Yeah. Explain that.
Yeah, there are people who are openly pro-communist who are graduating from West Point, and they are not kicking them out openly. They're not kicking them out.
Are they of Chinese or Russian descent, or?
No, they're Americans.
All right.
And this is a problem. This is a problem.
Well, we know they're openly promoting woke and transgender, and
yes.
We've talked about this analogy, for years, while the strategy of the Russians and the Chinese is to train hard, ruthless killers, we're softening our military by making them undertake all these woke and adopt all these woke policies and belief systems.
Well,
Right?
this is
It can't be
asymmetrical
healthy.
warfare. You know,
Right.
this is asymmetrical warfare. When you trying to get transgendered and to have women in carrier battle groups and so on, you talk to any admiral who's honest, and he'll say this is disruptive of naval operations. Look, it's all trying to diminish the effectiveness of our military. You know, when a U.S. warship deploys to a battle zone, and the significant part of the women on it get scared, they get pregnant, and it disrupts the unit, the military unit.
Wow.
You know.
All right. How are they going to conquer America? Just where do you want to say? You said Russia's going to come in, use nukes. China is going to use bioweapons. Russia's going to invade through Alaska and into Canada. China's going to come in through Mexico with the millions of their manpower. You know, what else would you tell us about that strategy?
Well, the strategy is that we have fallen behind, really badly behind. Look, they've got hypersonic missiles that can destroy aircraft carriers. What is the chance that an aircraft
They
carrier
can
can
destroy
survive?
an aircraft carrier, not
Oh
with a
yeah.
nuke, just with traditional weapons.
Oh yeah. No, they don't need a nuclear weapon. Look, a hypersonic missile, because of the speed at which it travels and the impact that it has, it's going to split an aircraft carrier in half.
It obliterates anything.
And it obliterated. And so since it travels too fast to be intercepted, realistically, and by the way, these things now outrange the aircraft on the carrier. So if you can reach the carrier before the carrier can come into range to destroy you, the carrier really is in trouble. And so our carriers.
I've read about that in past years. These hypersonic, they don't carry warheads on them. They're just some kind of really necessarily. They're just they have the really hard metal and they travel at such speed. And when it impacts, it creates such energy just from the pure speed that it just obliterates whatever it touches. You don't even need a explosion per se, right?
Yeah, I mean, you've got a tremendous destructive weapon, and they've got ballistic missile versions of this.
Do we have those too?
We're trying to develop them. I don't know to what our state is in that.
All right, so let's go to. I want to spend a few minutes on that's terrifying. The nuclear first strike.
Okay.
You believe that, again, Russia has been developing a strategy, knowing that America has not kept up its arsenal, its nuclear arsenal. You talked about new warheads not coming till later. You believe that Russia believes that it can win a nuclear war with a first strike strategy that will essentially wipe us out before we can respond. Is that true?
Well, it's complicated and it's very risky. And but they have developed. Look, Russia has a first-rate ABM system. They've been deploying the S-500. It's a dual-purpose surface-to-air missile ABM. It can actually intercept. One of these missiles can intercept and destroy a whole cloud of incoming warheads. Remember, we have multiple independent targetable warheads.
Wow.
A whole cloud. You know, a nuclear warhead goes up, leaves the atmosphere, you know, an ICBM, and then it breaks up into its different warheads, and that's a cloud of incoming warheads. And
how many are we talking? 50, 100?
Well, I think our MIRVing is 3 to 10. I don't think we've got that. We've lowered our MIRVing. I mean, the MX was MIRVing quite a few. I think the Minuteman probably.
MIRVing, what's that term? I don't know that term.
That means that each missile carries more than one warhead.
Okay.
And when it reaches space, the warheads separate out. They could go to different targets. I think the Minutemen have three different warheads.
Okay.
But anyway, what this missile does is it carries, the Russian interceptor missile carries like an X-ray radiation warhead. And what that warhead does is it can be miles away from this incoming cloud of warheads. And it can basically, it's like an EMP strike to the warhead components, so that all those incoming warheads are duds. You know, to have a hydrogen bomb reaction, you have a very complicated mechanism in these hydrogen bomb warheads that can be disabled. And they just disable it electronically with this kind of an attack. If the warhead makes it into the atmosphere, they use a neutron warhead to disable the components. And this is.
So you're
Yeah.
saying between the Russia's offensive capacity of a first strike, blowing up military installations or nuclear weapon facilities here, that they also have an advanced defensive mechanism that can take down a lot of whatever we manage to get off to them. And
Right.
that's that 1-2 punch is how they think they can survive.
Yeah, and they have a third element. All of their major cities have not only fallout shelters, but blast shelters, cities beneath the cities where they've stockpiled grain and food and water, and their entire population can be sheltered.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. This is the long-term strategy that we see China and Russia deploying that we can't even begin to think about in this country.
No, we can't. And in fact, look, there's several cities in the Ural Mountains that are underground, like Yamato Mountain. These are cities that are so deep underground, our tunneling missiles can't even reach them. And this is where their military industry is located, in completely protected underground cities.
So, you've got me rattled here. That's a scary scenario. Now, it's not just, all right, so we've mentioned nuclear attacks. We've mentioned bioweapons attacks. You briefly mentioned just the mass, kinetic attacks of millions of Chinese troops invading from Mexico. But it even goes beyond that. You mentioned the EMP, electromagnetic attacks, which would basically shut down anything electric, internet based in our whole country. And as well as other cyber warfare where you would plant bugs or do it that way. So it's really a 4 or 5 pronged strategy they have here.
It's very complicated. And then there's the asymmetrical warfare of having their agents in our government, in our intelligence. Right now, the United States government is saying that patriots are terrorists. Now, where in the heck is that coming from? You talk about asymmetrical warfare. They've got Americans vilifying Americanism, and they're basically, look, when you hear Putin being vilified by Biden has been a friend of the Russians his whole political career. His Senate career was made by Arm & Hammer, and as Edward J. Epstein has shown through documents through a now declassified French and German sources, Arm & Hammer was a Soviet agent during his career. And he is the one that put not only Al Gore Jr. and Sr. in the Senate, but he's largely responsible for Biden's career. And that Biden has been supported by communist fronts like the Council for a Livable World. Look, for when Biden says he's going to help Ukraine, I'm very skeptical. Very, very skeptical.
You're saying he doesn't want to help Ukraine? Really?
No, he doesn't want to. Just like Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, doesn't want to. He is forced by optics, by the public, and
something, right.
The left in the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party has been penetrated by the left, by the Marxist left. In fact,
but even a Marxist American. So what are you saying, that Marxist Americans want Russian and or Chinese rule over America, or they want America?
Oh no, they
policies. Which
no,
one is it?
The Marxists in America think they're going to make a wonderful Marxist socialist country. They don't understand that in Beijing and Moscow, and they haven't really understood Marx properly. I mean, Marx was a sociopath. So was Stalin and these other people. And it was, politics is about power. Well, it's about 3 things, right? Power, power, and power. And what they don't understand is that as a 5th column in the United States, they're being used. And communism has always been seen by the Russians, by the Chinese, as a way to destroy America. Now, they will make socialist countries, all around the globe. That's their ultimate objective, is to make a socialist global order in which Beijing and Moscow are the centers, in which they basically divide the world between them. But what these American Marxists don't realize is the Russians and Chinese don't trust American Marxists because they're American.
Yeah, we're going to give you the real thing. We're going to come in and rule. So just a couple more questions here, Jeff. It appears what you're saying, the Chinese and the Russians have been preparing for nuclear catastrophic, worse than world war, world domination, where the West has not. So you are, I think, saying things at two levels. A, we're not prepared to fight a war in Ukraine, a conventional war, and obviously we're not willing to take that risk. Biden, Europe, nobody wants to even give them airplanes for fear of provoking a broader conflict just in Ukraine. So A, we're not even ready to fight that kind of war, or willing to. Not only are they willing, they've been planning it, but at a larger level, you're saying the West is woefully unprepared for the kind of geopolitical war, military war, that China and Russia are preparing for.
We are psychologically unprepared. And I'll just give you an example. I was in a meeting with people, strategists, people who advise people in government and have worked in the Pentagon and the CIA. And one of the a number of the people were saying 4 months ago that China is such a threat, we need to play the Russia card, right? We need to play the Russia card. Now I thought that was crazy. And I said to them,
what does that mean? What does that mean?
Remember, Nixon played the China card, remember?
Yeah, yeah.
Divide Russia and China from each other, and we'll build up China, and we'll make China a power, and China will counterbalance Russia. How well has that worked out for us? And the thing is, the idea that we can
created
decide,
a beast, right?
Right. Yep. The idea that we can decide what side Russia is on. Russia's already chosen its side. It's with China. And the idea that it's childish to think, oh, well, we'll just make the Russians our friends. No, I'm sorry.
You mean Obama and Hillary Clinton's Great Reset was a little bit foolish?
Oh yeah, it was totally stupid. And what I think is that after Obama was caught on the hot mic talking to President Medvedev, tell Vladimir I can be more flexible after the election. I think they decided they had to posture being anti-Russian after that, because they
Do you think Obama's a Marxist?
Oh yes. Oh yeah, he obviously is. You look at his background.
And you think Biden is too, or is he just too weak to stand up to them?
I think Biden was bought and paid for by them. I don't know what he believes, but he was a politician who was bought and paid for by people who were basically Russian Soviet agents.
All right, last question. Do you have any faith, any knowledge, any words of encouragement that despite the apparent, I'm going to say apparent strategic shortcomings where Russia and China have been planning and preparing and we've not,
Oops.
Do you believe that somewhere in the U.S. military, in the U.S. government, you there, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm there. We just had a blip. Yeah.
All right. Do you believe that somewhere, somebody for the last decades or last few decades, that somehow America might be better prepared than we've just presented in this interview? Do you have any ray of hope that somewhere there has been a constant force to really protect this country out there, or no?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I saw very encouraging things after the pandemic started. At the end of March, towards the beginning of April of 2020, the US placed a permanent nuclear warfighting staff in deep bunkers in Colorado. There was indications that our military and our strategists understood that Russia and China, you go back, you look at some of the statements of our generals in front of Congress, and they were saying, Russia and China are together. We have to treat them militarily like they are together. And so there are people in some of our good strategists, our 4-star generals, they understand this. And so I don't have great faith in General Milley, but others of the generals do, I think. And we have been scrambling to try to prepare, to try to get ready. And the Russians have stubbed their toe in Ukraine. We have we've been cut at such a break. Wow. And see what people, look, they're socialists, they're dictators. This is what always happens with these people. They have these grandiose schemes. This is part of a psychopathic mentality. They have grandiose schemes, but they are not omnicompetent. They can't make everything happen the way they want. And no planet survives contact with the enemy. And the biggest problem Russia and China have is their own people. Look, Putin has had to make Russia into a kind of North Korea now. He has to isolate the country from the rest of the world because the Russian people, if they see what he's doing in Ukraine, if they understand it, the Russian people will turn against him. And the Chinese people, look.
Is there any hope that the Chinese people could become knowledgeable enough and do the same? That's a different mindset, right?
It's
They're
a
not,
different
you know,
mindset.
Russians
Yeah.
at least sort of have a Christian sort of Western mindset, but the Chinese, I mean, that's a Far East. That's a totally different mindset, right?
Yeah, the Russians have been exposed to European
Yeah.
ideas
And
and
Christian
culture
values. Yeah.
at close range for the last 30 years since the fall of the Soviet Union. There has been changes psychologically. We see it in Ukraine. This is why there's you could call this a civil war within the Soviet Union that's broken out. And so they are in, their strategy has gone awry, just like their strategies always go awry. Like they went awry in 1989 with the Gorbachev liberalization. They got things back on track, but here they are again. Oops, we goofed again. With all their weapons and with all their abilities, 8 generals being sacked by Putin, 2 of their top intelligence people under arrest. Their confidence has been shaken. And dare they now follow through on any aggressive plans given what's happened? It's a hopeful situation, if not only to buy us time.
But like we said earlier, I think in our first phase part of our interview, Putin's crossed that Rubicon. He really can't go back unless it's in a dominating position. So while America may be scrambling, so the good news is you think there are people who are aware of the danger and are trying now to try to catch up and do something about it, even though the other 2 countries, Russia and China, have a 20-year head start on us on that. That it sounds like your best hope to head this off might be internally in Russia, among Russian people and leaders there who don't want to see all this happen.
Yeah, and the fact that their system, there's a bungle factor. I call it the bungle factor.
Okay. Yeah.
You look at the Stalin's invasion of Finland, you look at the date, a lot of people don't know this date, but it's one of the biggest dates in Russian and Soviet history. It's 22 June 1941. The Soviet Union was attacked by Nazi Germany, and they suffered one of the biggest military defeats in the history of the world. The Germans were vastly outnumbered by the Soviets. We know now that the Russians had 24,000 tanks to Hitler's 3,500 tanks, and he wiped them out. In the first year of that war, there were, because the Soviets were producing more tanks, he had almost 35,000 tanks destroyed. There's actually one of the only tape recordings of Hitler privately speaking to the Finnish General Mannerheim, the defense minister. On Mannerheim's birthday, Hitler flew to Finland, and he said, "Look, we have captured or destroyed almost 35,000 Soviet tanks. If I'd known they had that many tanks, I wouldn't have invaded." They're tremendously stronger than people realize, but then they're weaker. Because it's a top-down system.
Yeah.
The bosses lie to the underlings, and the underlings lie back to them, and things just go wrong.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Jeff Nyquist, eye-opening, hopefully not prophetic information today. But this is information not too many Americans are aware of. We look forward to having our viewers watch it. I'm sure we're going to have you back soon as things develop. I hope you'll be interested in coming back. Thank you for your information today. I just have to say, I hope you're wrong. I just hope you're wrong.
I've always hoped I was wrong.
I pray that you're wrong. But Jeff, thank you for joining us on The Current and on In the Dugout.
Thank you.